To another edition of Defo on 5. Jeff DeForest, Mike Lubitz with you here on 5 Reasons Sports Network. And I don't know whether to buy it or not. That's the big question today. Do we buy it or not, Mike Lubitz? Right now, we are the big story in Major League Baseball here in South Florida. Do you buy it? Are you buying or selling? What do you think? That's always the big question around the trade deadline. Hey, who's going to be a buyer? Who's going to be a seller? I got players for sale. I need somebody. But I don't know what direction the team will go in at that stage of the season. But the Miami Marlins right now, the number one story on SportsCenter last night, as Luis Arise, ends up going 5 for 5. That's his third five-hit game of the month of June. Now, he had a little bit of a slump, a brief respite there from the sensational contact hitting that he's been exhibiting all throughout the season here, but now back up to 400. So his average, which is not easy to do when you have a large number of at bats. I mean, he has to be approaching what he has 100 hits plus already in is it 67 games, something like that. 100 hits, very quick to that number. Second, I guess, in Marlins history, D. Gordon had over 100 hits in the same number of games, or a couple of games less. But nonetheless, as you're looking at Luis Ariz, and we were questioning that acquisition. Always nice to have, and look at me, of all people, to be questioning this, Mike Lubitz. Of all people, a guy that hits for average. He won the batting title last year in the American League. I want to say he hit like 315. Ended up beating Aaron Judge, who went into a mild slump as he was chasing Roger Maris's golden number there of 61 in the American League record of 62 home runs, which he eventually accomplished. But you'll recall, Lubie, last couple of weeks of the season when Judge was on 61, all of a sudden he started striking out. The average dipped, and he lost a chance at the Triple Crown. He was a runaway winner in home runs and runs batted in, and had a chance at the Triple Crown, which I think is a phenomenal accomplishment to hit for power in today's modern age of baseball, and at the same time hit for a very high batting average, good enough to beat everybody in the league. Sensational. But Arise messed that up, and that was about all we knew about Luis Arise. Would you say, is it fair to say, Mike Lubitz, that this guy, for an American League batting champion, for a guy that's being compared to Rod Carew, to Tony Oliva, is a relative unknown, and was when he came to the Marlins, and we traded what we thought was one of our team's strengths and one of the few strengths that we had, and that was a 1-2 punch at the top of the starting rotation with Sandy Alcantara, who has been slumping this year by comparison to anything that he did last year, and maybe rounding back into form a little bit, and Pablo Lopez, the very popular Pablo Lopez, popular for good reasons because he was just a hell of a good guy, Pablo Lopez. Nobody wanted to see this guy go, but it was one of the commodities the Marlins felt they were rich in. They were lacking in hitting and power, so they get Luis Ariz, and look what's happened, Luby. Look what's happened. 5 for 5 last night. They knock off the Blue Jays 11-0. A bullpen game, which normally would be horrifying for the Miami Marlins to think, oh, my goodness, we're going to have a guy go out there and pitch like 2 innings and then bring in the rest of the bullpen. They shut out the hard-hitting Toronto Blue Jays, and the Marlins have now won 6 in a row, 11 games over 500. And yet, all that being said, they still sit 4.5 games back of the Atlanta Braves with what I believe is the second best or third best record, something like that, in the National League. I guess there are a couple of teams ahead of them with 44 wins, but sitting there in a pretty lofty position. In a million years, could you have imagined this at this stage of the season, Mike Lubitz? So I figured we'd be lucky to, have the team, hover around 500 for some of the year, and then maybe fade in the end, and we get our drive for 75 wins, try to hit the over total, which I don't know what it was this year, but it could have been, much more than 80. And so the Marlins looking really good at this stage of the season and playing an exciting brand of baseball in front of the 3,000 or 4,000 that show up every night. It's great. Our man Tommy Hutton was doing a game last night, and that's an easy one, isn't it? When your team is on fire, 5 singles in the game, but a variety of different hits. The way this guy slashes at the baseball, Arise, just incredible. Really is reminiscent of, and I saw a lot of Rod Carew games when he was with the Angels. Very similar to what we saw from Rod Carew in terms of bat control and just the ability to go ahead and hit the ball to all fields, not trying to overdo anything. He only has 2 home runs. I know that. But would people actually look at that in a disparaging fashion with a guy that's hitting 400? That's how reversed they're thinking. how upside down the thinking is in Major League Baseball today. But anyway, what do you think, Louis? Are we buying or selling at this point with the Miami Marlins?
I'm not buying. It's only freaking June. But what I'll say is I'm intrigued and I'm excited. And it's interesting to see that the success we've had in the other sports down here seems to have rubbed off elsewhere. The Dolphins are going all in a way we have never seen them do it. The Marlins have actually gone and signed players, and outside of uh, Avisel Garcia, every signing has actually looked decent. Soler is doing his job, hitting home runs. Arise is getting on base. He's moving people over. Their bullpen is much stronger than it was. For all the crap I gave Kamang, the moves that actually she's made, because that's the thing. A lot of the stuff wasn't like they weren't her picks. Peyton Burdick and JJ Bleday were not her picks. The moves she's made so far have led to a team that's right now a contender. Look, I mean, we're almost halfway through the year. That's you can't sneeze at that. Like that's not, and that's usually when this team struggles. It's usually the team usually struggles up until about now. Then they'll wake up in June and July and give you a little hope, and then they'll go back to sucking, or they'll be so far down it won't matter. Like if they can get to this point now, I mean, what the hell? And the NL East sucks. The NL East has turned out to be a freaking disaster, which plays right into their hands. Even though they play the NL East less this year, so of course the year it sucks they played less, it's going to be one of the rest of their opponents. So to see what they're doing is pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie, and I feel bad for Mattingly because I don't think it has anything to do with Schumacher. But Schumacher,
It may. I don't know. I mean, is it possible to just completely discount this guy? I don't know that it's fair. I mean, the biggest turnaround has been in one-run games. Now, that could be relatable to a lot of different things. Bad luck being one, but it was always a disaster when Mattingly had to go to the bullpen. That hasn't been the case. AJ Puck has established himself as a reasonably reliable closer so far. And when he comes into the game, you feel at least a modest level of comfort. It's not like you're bringing in Diaz with the Mets if he was playing this year, or one of the lights out closers, Hadar, or any of the guys that we've seen over the years. But and we've had many top closers that we have let go to other organizations that went on to Hall of Fame type careers, including the great Trevor Hoffman. And we've had many guys here that look like they could stay for a long period of time that we quickly dumped in moves with salaries and free agency. But Kim Eng, we trashed Kim Eng pretty hard for her signings, deemed them to be cosmetic at the beginning of the season. And that was the word that we got from Dave Hyde, a great writer from the Sun Sentinel. We asked him, do you think these moves are cosmetic or going to be impactful? And he said, he was kind of hesitantly, yeah, strictly cosmetic. Which the cosmetics are working, man. This is, like going to the Derby and you're saying, wait a minute, could every girl, every woman in Louisville possibly be this beautiful? Or is it cosmetics based on the fact that they're all dressed up and giving it their all on Kentucky Derby Day with the hats and the dresses and everything? But yeah, I mean, you can't put lipstick on a pig. So you would have to say at this point that Kim Eng would be a legitimate candidate for Executive of the Year, and that Skip Schumacher, in spite of our love for Don Mattingly, probably is a legitimate candidate for Manager of the Year at this stage. And it's not as if it's so early. I mean, yes, there's still a little more than half a season to go. But you're talking about it was just Juneteenth yesterday, June 19th. It's June 20th. You have a guy hitting 400, and you're 11 games over 500. Not bad. And a guy that's close to the major league lead in home runs with Jorge Soler, who's upped his average to about 260. So a very powerful 260 that he's hitting. And you have other contributions coming from other areas in the lineup, including a guy that everybody likes, but didn't look like he was going to be this type of effective player, John Birdie, hitting in the 270s. Dela Cruz has been a real asset. Jesus Sanchez, we saw him make that great catch, game-saving catch the other day of what would have been a game-tying grand slam. And the Marlins were able to keep their streak going. And, yeah, you would have to say these moves were more than effective. A couple of things stand out, and yet you don't know what the limitations were either. Because, there was a time here with the Marlins that we actually had a core of Stanton hitting 59 home runs, Ozuna, who was on fire, Christian Yelich, who would go on to win an MVP award in one of the following seasons, and JT Realmuto, regarded by many to be all around the best catcher in the game. and could well, qualify for that stature. I don't know if you want to go that far, but he's certainly in the top five of backstops in the game when you factor in the hitting and his defense. And in the meantime, we have behind the plate a guy that's hitting like 160 every night, which is kind of ugly. Still a lot of holes in that team, no doubt, but I'm reluctantly to believe, Lubie. I'm starting to believe. And, maybe that's a dangerous thing because anytime that we jump on the bandwagon, it's usually a disaster, kiss of death, a catastrophe for any team that we start pulling for. But it worked for us with the Heat and the Panthers, and it's working right now with the Marlins, continuing what has been a sensational run. Is it enough to carry us to the football season, Louis? This run by the Marlins, because you have to suspend disbelief at this point and figure, okay, in August, are we going to be saying the same things about these guys? Yet that's just a little over a month away. So a great story there with the Miami Marlins. 11-0 yesterday over Toronto, 6 in a row, and now sitting there 11 games over 500 at 42-31, 4.5 back in the East. They have a winning record on the road of 20-18, and not a bad start to a season that now looks like it might perpetuate itself. In fact, the season didn't start all that well, but it has certainly picked up the pace here. Now, they were playing some crummy teams. The projection still is very, very faint. 82 games for the Marlins to win in whatever basis they're using for these projections on CBS Sportsline. But when you look at the standings, it defies logic, does it not? We're talking about 73 games into the season. You already have 42 wins. You're thinking should be able to win 40 more, no? Without that much difficulty if they continue this momentum. Interesting, though, and nice to see that we have something else to root for here besides counting the days for training camp to open up with the Dolphins and then analyzing every pass that's thrown in practice. A lot of other things going on. Basketball, your favorite, off-season basketball. You had the trade now and in the aftermath fallout from the Chris Paul deal to the Wizards for Bradley Beal. He may end up where? With the Clippers teaming with Russell Westbrook? Is that possible? What kind of backcourt is that going to be? Russell Westbrook and an aging Chris Paul.
Oh, God.
With Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? I don't know. The Clippers, this bomber I bought in for $2 billion when Donald Sterling, that was probably the most beneficial, racial statements ever made by anybody, right? Where Donald Sterling gets $2 billion of bombers' money for, obviously being, what else can you say? I mean, is he a racist bastard, this guy? No, he was just a horrible person, wasn't he? Donald Sterling?
Yes, Sterling was horrendous and very racist. He was all the things.
Everything that the league doesn't want to represent, Donald Sterling stood for, and he stood there very solid and steadfastly for 30 plus years. Because the league didn't want to touch any of its owners. That's always great. The commissioner is always a big tough guy until he has to challenge an owner. And then, they were throwing fines. Stern loved to fine Mark Cuban, but what did he really do to Mark Cuban that was going to dissuade him from continuing his endless barrage of epithets that he referred to the officials as? And Sterling, I mean, he couldn't have been, he's on tape. You would think that would be the case with the Trump stuff, right? You're on tape, for God's sake, Donnie. How many more denials can you issue before we say, well, wait a minute, this is what you said. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go back and fact check that. The Blazers trying to deal a number 3 pick to try and find help. I mean, why wouldn't they want to have the number 3 pick? And if this is Scoot guy who is supposed to be just a dynamo, I mean, will he turn out to be better than Wembanyama or whatever his name is going to San Antonio? Some people are speculating that Wembanyama may be a great pick, but may not be the end all that and be all that a lot of people think he's going to be in the NBA. But we'll see. I guess that's easy to go ahead and throw that out there, right? Well, what if he's not that good?
I mean, his only issue is staying healthy. I mean, guys of that size are 100% get hurt. Not 80, not 60.
Vulnerable, yes.
4 and up or 7-3. I think it's 7-3 and up have always gotten hurt young and have never been able to have long careers. It's just literally a 100% sum. So that's his issue. It's not his ability. The guy is the most physically gifted prospect since LeBron, and he may be even more physically gifted than like what that guy can do. We've never seen in one human being.
How good is this Scoot Henderson guy?
Henderson's legit. Henderson in most drafts would be the number one pick.
Yeah.
He's not Wembanyama. Like, it's not even comparable. And that's the thing for Portland. Like, Wembanyama is going to come in right away and be really good and either take the Spurs to the playoffs or within a couple of years, they're going to be in the playoffs and maybe a contender. Henderson's not that. Like, Henderson's going to take some time to become good, and Lillard doesn't have that. Like, Lillard needs to win now. And somehow he hasn't gotten it through his head that it's not going to happen in Portland. Like, I give him credit for being this loyal. I think it's actually gotten to the point where he's stupid. Like, he actually
Says he wants to go back there. He wants to stay there.
He can say he's not going to win. Like, this isn't Dallas. Like, no one's going there at all, and no one wants their stupid trade. Like, Scoot Henderson is the kind of guy that would be great on a young team. Like, no team with a star wants Scoot Henderson. Like, teams with a star want other stars. They don't want to give up their star for a. He's young. He only did 1 year. He's like 19. Like, it's going to take him like 2-3 years to figure it out. Like, look at Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is a supreme talent. The two of us either don't make the playoffs or lose in the first round every year. Like, it takes those guys like 2, 3, 4 years. Like, that's the thing with John. Like, people don't like John Moran was a sophomore, junior. Like, John Moran was a little older, so he came in right away. Like, these guys don't come in right away leading teams to playoffs. Like, that's not how that works. I don't understand what Lillard's doing, and I get it. They're going to try and trade it. No one wants it. No one who has a star is like, here, take my star for your young guy that will be good in 4 years. Like, that's not how it works. And I don't get what Damian Lillard's doing. I'm all about loyalty, but we've learned loyalty in sports doesn't get you anywhere. Like, it gets you nowhere.
Well, and it's not usually reciprocated, as evidenced by Chris Paul finding out through his son that he was traded to the Wizards. And, that was his reward for being a pretty dedicated player and, a real force for the Phoenix Suns. I mean, he did what they asked of him. He got hurt in the postseason. Might have been in slight decline, but had he been around, and let's not forget, Phoenix, the only team to take 2 games off of the Denver Nuggets in the postseason. Everybody else, at best, could do 1. Lakers ended up getting swept in that series, and they were not without talent on that team. It wasn't like they weren't playing well at the time after taking out Memphis in the second round. So, or Golden State in the second round, and Memphis in the first round. So, they had played some dynamic teams. A lot of people thought Golden State was going to be in a winner's circle at the end of the season. Draymond Green declines $28 million.
Okay.
What do you make of that, Lubie? Does
Yeah,
he test the waters elsewhere, or is he just what could he possibly re-sign for with Golden State if he wasn't going to take their $28 million? Since they are badly inflated over the salary cap and immersed heavily in red ink in the luxury tax. That luxury tax scares you. How does that scare these NBA owners when the value of the franchise escalates so greatly, from 1 year to the next and from one owner to the next?
Because you don't make the money until you sell,
Yeah.
and these guys like owning, so it's an asset, but you're not making like you make money on it. But if you're in the luxury tax, you're only making so much. Outside of the Warriors, most teams don't make hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
No.
So if you're paying $100 million in luxury tax, you're only making so much profit. It's when you sell it that you sell it for $3 billion. But okay, they don't want to sell. So until they sell, they're not making that money. They're not liquid. So they'd rather not pay the luxury tax. Now, to me, if you're making championship runs, it's worth it because you're having playoff tickets. And
that has to have some extra value, I would think.
Make a lot more money. The deeper you go, the more money you make. But the problem is going to the luxury tax to then like be the Pelicans, where they have like 3 or 4 dudes that are making a lot of money, and I don't even know if they made the playoffs.
I think Mickey Harrison, and I don't see, he's a great guy. I've met Mickey Harrison, and I've told you the story about how humble he was for a guy of his wherewithal and the amount of gout that he has. He'd probably rather see one of his luxury cruise ships get lost in the Bermuda Triangle than pay the luxury tax.
He hates
it.
He
hates it, man.
He'll do it if they're going to win a title, which I think is weird because they've been to the finals twice in the conference finals the last 3 of the last 4 years. Like, who else can say that they're close to winning a title? Like, that's the problem with Mickey. He's like, well, if we have a chance to win, okay, who has a better chance? No one's gone farther than you the last 4 years.
How do you say no to Pat Riley when Pat comes in there and says, hey, Mick, look, about a couple of bucks for the luxury tax? Huh? He doesn't like it either. I mean, his state of position seems to be stay away from that like the plague. Venus Williams, your girl, won a tennis match yesterday in a tournament. Been watching this grass court stuff. It's going on various parts of the world. On early in the morning, already live action this morning with Sinner versus Gasquet. Venus Williams is still playing, believe it or not, and beat Camilla Giorgi, ranked number 48 in the world, the darling of the Italian tennis circuit, and one of the kind of modern day Anna Kournikovas in terms of her physical appearance. Everybody loves Camilla Giorgi. She does compete very hard. Isn't the greatest of players, ranked as I said 48. Venus Williams knocks her out of whatever tournament they were playing. I don't know. They're somewhere in Germany, maybe. Hard to tell because they keep flipping back and forth to various tournaments. There are about 3 or 4 of them going on at the same time. But she ends up winning and moving on to the second round. She appeared to be out of gas in the second set. I think that one might have gone 3. So Venus Williams, congratulations to her. And the College Baseball World Series, some good stuff going on there. Mike Lubie Lubitz, you ought to take a look at that. Florida Gators signed another huge recruit and now have moved up to number 3, supposedly, in recruiting classes. And Florida State, Lubie, favored to win the ACC. I know that's going to be a tough one for you to live with because if you could book the media's action, you'd be a rich man today. All right, we'll have the Defo Show coming up 7 o'clock on South Florida Live. We ask you to go ahead, if you enjoy what we do here, to subscribe to that because it's a numbers game. That's what it's all about. So join us there, and we'll have a couple of hours of live frivolity coming up and a further, deeper examination of the sporting world on the Defo Show. Thanks for tuning in. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. That's today's edition of Defo on 5.